Dr. Lisa Morgan pressed her face against the small window of the submarine and watched the ocean floor pass beneath them like an alien world. The research vessel USS Atlantic Explorer floated 8,000 meters above the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean, and Lisa had been studying these dark waters for 15 years. She knew every rock formation and every strange creature that lived in this crushing darkness. But today something felt different. Captain Jake Harrison sat at the controls of their small submarine, his experienced hands moving over the buttons and switches with easy confidence. He had been diving to these depths for 20 years and nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. Amy Rodriguez sat behind them, her eyes fixed on the sonar screen that showed the world around them in green lines and dots. The three of them made a good team, exploring places where no human had ever been before. The submarine's lights cut through the black water, showing glimpses of the ocean floor far below. Strange fish with glowing eyes swam past their windows, and giant tube worms swayed in the deep currents. This was the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth, where the pressure would crush a human body in seconds without protection. Only their strong submarine kept them alive in this hostile place. Amy suddenly sat up straight and stared at her screen. Something was wrong with the sonar readings. Instead of the usual flat ocean floor, her instruments showed massive shapes rising from the depths like underwater mountains. But these shapes had straight lines and perfect angles that nature never made. They pulsed with a soft blue light that her equipment had never detected before. Jake looked at his own instruments and frowned. His depth finder showed structures that stretched for miles across the ocean floor, but his map said this area should be empty except for mud and rocks. He had dived here many times before and knew every feature of this underwater landscape. These giant shapes had not been there last month. Lisa grabbed her camera and started taking pictures through the submarine's window. The structures below them looked like enormous buildings or machines, covered in a web of glowing lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, clearly made by some intelligence but not by human hands. The patterns of light seemed to communicate something, but she could not understand their meaning. The submarine's radio crackled to life with urgent voices from the surface ship above them. Similar reports were coming in from research stations all around the world. Giant structures had appeared overnight in the deepest parts of every ocean, rising from places where humans had never seen anything except empty seafloor. Commander Steve Parker sat in the Naval Underwater Warfare Center, thousands of miles away, and tried to make sense of the reports flooding his desk. Research teams in the Atlantic Ocean were sending pictures of crystal towers that reached up from the bottom of the Puerto Rico Trench. Japanese scientists reported massive domes appearing in their deepest waters. Ships near South America found strange spiral structures rising from the Peru-Chile Trench. All of these discoveries had happened at the same time, as if someone had been waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The structures were too big and too complex to be natural formations, and they had appeared too quickly to be built by any known technology. Steve had spent his entire career studying underwater warfare, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The alien structures continued to grow as Lisa and her team watched from their submarine. New sections unfolded like giant flowers blooming in fast motion, adding rooms and corridors to the already massive complex below them. The blue lights grew brighter and began to form new patterns, almost like writing in a language that humans had never seen before. Jake tried to pilot their submarine closer to get a better look, but his controls suddenly stopped responding. The craft began to move on its own, drawn toward the alien structures by some invisible force. Amy's sonar screen filled with new contacts as dozens of objects rose from the depths around them, moving with purpose and intelligence. The objects looked like living creatures but moved like machines, their bodies transparent, except for networks of glowing veins that pulsed with the same blue light as the structures below. They were beautiful and graceful as they swam through the water, but their size was frightening. Each one was larger than their submarine, and more kept rising from the depths. Lisa realized they were looking at the builders of the structures. beings that had chosen Earth's deepest oceans as their new home. The aliens had been studying the planet from the safety of the deep trenches, places where humans rarely went and never stayed for long. They had built their cities in the one part of Earth that humans could not easily reach or defend. The alien creatures surrounded their submarine but did not attack. Instead, they seemed curious about these small surface dwellers who had ventured into their domain. Their large eyes studied the humans through the submarine's windows, and their body lights pulsed in complex patterns that might have been attempts at communication. Commander Parker ordered all naval vessels to stay away from the deep ocean areas where the structures had appeared. Until they knew more about these aliens and their intentions, it was too dangerous to send more people into the depths. But Lisa and her team were already there, face to face with beings from another world who had claimed Earth's oceans as their own territory. The aliens had chosen their new home well, taking control of the largest and least explored part of the planet. They commanded the crushing depths where human technology barely functioned and where rescue would be impossible if something went wrong. From their underwater cities, they could reach any part of Earth's surface, but humanity could not easily reach them in return. As their submarine was gently pushed back toward the surface by the alien creatures, Lisa knew that everything had changed. Earth was no longer humanity's alone, and the newcomers had claimed the vast oceans that covered most of the planet. The deep waters that had once seemed empty and lifeless now teemed with alien intelligence, and humanity would have to learn to share their world with beings whose motives they did not yet understand. Admiral Helen Carter stood in the Pentagon's Emergency Command Center and watched the world change before her eyes. 3 days had passed since the alien structures first appeared in Earth's deepest waters, and now it was clear that their arrival was not peaceful. The beings from the depths had begun their attack on human civilization, starting with the hidden systems that connected the world beneath the waves. The first sign of war came when internet connections across the globe began failing without warning. The underwater cables that carried messages between continents were being cut or destroyed by creatures that moved through the deep ocean like living torpedoes. Within hours, communication between countries became difficult, and the global economy started to collapse as banks and businesses lost contact with their partners overseas. Dr. Kevin Walsh received an urgent call to report to the naval base where he had been working on new submarine designs. His experimental deep-diving vehicles were some of the few machines that could reach the depths where the aliens had built their cities. Kevin had spent years developing technology that could withstand the crushing pressure of the deepest ocean, never imagining that his work would become humanity's first line of defense against invasion. The aliens revealed their true nature when their biomechanical vessels rose from the trenches like nightmare creatures born from the darkest depths. They looked like giant jellyfish crossed with spacecraft, their transparent bodies filled with glowing organs that pulsed with alien intelligence. These living ships moved through the water with impossible grace, immune to the pressure that would destroy any human-made vehicle. Oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico began reporting strange problems as their drilling platforms shook and tilted for no apparent reason. Workers on the rigs saw massive shapes moving beneath the water, creatures the size of buildings that burrowed through the ocean floor like it was soft mud. Within days, billion-dollar oil platforms collapsed into the sea as the aliens undermined their foundations with surgical precision. Marine Colonel Danny Foster was stationed near San Diego when the aliens made their first surface attack. He watched in horror as creatures emerged from the Pacific Ocean like living mountains, their bodies covered in bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The beings stood 50 feet tall and moved with fluid grace, despite their enormous size. Seemingly unaffected by gravity or the air that humans needed to breathe, the military's first attempts to fight back ended in disaster. Nuclear submarines that ventured too close to the alien territories simply vanished from sonar screens. Their fate unknown but certainly grim? Fighter jets that attacked the surface creatures found their weapons useless against beings that could somehow bend light around themselves and disappear from targeting systems. Admiral Carter realized that humanity was facing an enemy that controlled the largest part of their planet. The aliens had chosen their invasion route with perfect strategic thinking, taking over the oceans that covered 71% of Earth's surface. From their underwater cities, they could attack any coastal area while remaining safely hidden. In depths that human forces could barely reach, the shipping industry ground to a complete halt as alien predators began hunting anything that moved through their expanding territory. Cargo ships that had crossed the oceans safely for decades suddenly found themselves stalked by creatures that could swim faster than any vessel could sail. The predators seemed to enjoy their hunt, playing with their prey before striking with appendages that could slice through steel hulls like paper. Kevin worked day and night with his team of engineers to modify existing submarines for combat in the deep ocean. The challenge was enormous because human weapons had never been designed to work at crushing depths where the water pressure could crack the strongest metals. Traditional explosives became useless in the dense water, and bullets moved too slowly. To hit fast-moving targets, the aliens demonstrated their control over the ocean environment by creating massive waves that struck coastlines around the world. They could manipulate underwater currents and temperature systems that humans barely understood, turning the sea itself into a weapon against the surface dwellers. Coastal cities found themselves flooded by tidal surges that came without warning, driven by alien technology that worked in harmony with natural forces. Dr. Walsh made a breakthrough when he realized that the aliens' biomechanical technology had weaknesses that could be exploited. Their living ships were perfectly adapted to specific pressure and temperature conditions, but they became vulnerable when those conditions changed rapidly. Human submarines could use their mechanical systems to move between different depth levels much faster than the organic alien vessels. Colonel Foster led the first successful counterattack against an alien surface creature using modified weapons that Kevin's team had developed. Instead of trying to destroy the being with brute force, they used sonic weapons that disrupted its ability to control light and sound around its body. The creature retreated to the ocean depths, proving that the aliens could be hurt and driven back. The discovery gave humanity its first hope since the invasion began. The aliens were not invincible gods of the deep ocean, but living beings with limitations that could be understood and exploited. Their perfect adaptation to the deep-sea environment made them vulnerable when forced to operate outside their preferred conditions. Admiral Carter established Deep-Sea Command as a new branch of the military dedicated to fighting the war beneath the waves. She brought together the best submarine crews, marine biologists, and underwater engineers from around the world to develop new strategies for combat in an environment where humans had never fought before. The aliens' greatest advantage was also their weakness. They had evolved or been designed for life in the crushing depths where no surface creature could survive, but this specialization limited their ability to adapt to changing conditions. Humans, with their crude mechanical technology and chaotic creativity, could function across a much wider range of environments. As reports continued to pour in from around the globe, the scope of the alien threat became clear. They had not just invaded Earth's oceans but had turned the entire marine ecosystem into their weapon. Fish and sea creatures began behaving strangely, following patterns that served alien purposes rather than natural instincts. The invaders were not just conquering territory but reshaping the planet to suit their needs. The war for Earth's oceans had begun, and humanity found itself fighting an enemy that commanded the largest battlefield on the planet. The aliens controlled the deep waters where human technology barely functioned, and they could strike at any point along thousands of miles of coastline. But humans had something the aliens did not expect: the stubborn refusal to surrender their home world to any invader. No matter how advanced or strange, Kevin's modified submarines would be humanity's answer to the alien threat, carrying the war into the depths where the enemy thought they were safe. The battle for control of Earth's oceans would determine whether humanity remained masters of their own planet or became prisoners on the small portions of land that the aliens allowed them to keep. The underwater laboratory buzzed with activity as Dr. Kevin Walsh and robotics expert Susan Clark worked around the clock to transform human submarines into weapons of war. Their workshop, built inside a converted aircraft hangar near the naval base, had become humanity's most important facility in the fight against the alien invaders. Torn-apart submarines lay scattered across the floor like the bodies of giant metal fish, their hulls open to reveal the complex modifications that would allow them to fight in the crushing depths. Susan's robotic arms moved with precise control as she installed new weapon systems into the cramped interior of a research submarine. The traditional torpedoes and missiles that worked well on the surface became useless in the deep ocean, where water pressure crushed conventional explosives before they could detonate. Instead, she and Kevin had developed railguns that used electromagnetic force to fire dense metal projectiles at incredible speeds through the water. The breakthrough came when Kevin realized they could use the ocean's own physics as a weapon. Cavitation torpedoes created bubbles in the water that collapsed with tremendous force, generating shock waves that could damage alien vessels without needing traditional explosives. The weapons worked by spinning rapidly as they moved through the water, creating empty spaces that the ocean rushed to fill with violent energy. Captain Lisa Barnes had volunteered to test the new weapons, despite having no formal submarine training. Her background as a Navy SEAL gave her the physical and mental toughness needed for underwater combat, but she had to learn how to pilot a submarine through three-dimensional battles, where up and down lost their meaning in the crushing darkness. The converted research vessel she commanded looked nothing like the sleek military submarines of old, bristling with new weapons and sensors that could function at impossible depths. Her first mission took her team to the edge of alien territory, where the invaders had built one of their smaller outposts on an underwater mountain. The alien structure glowed with the same blue bioluminescent patterns they had seen before. But now Lisa knew these lights were not just decoration, but part of a complex communication system that connected all the alien cities across the ocean. The battle began when alien creatures detected their approach and rose from the structure like living missiles. These beings were smaller than the massive jellyfish ships that had destroyed the nuclear submarines, but they moved through the water with deadly speed and purpose. Lisa had studied their movement patterns from previous encounters and knew they followed predictable paths. Based on water currents and pressure changes, she ordered her pilot to dive rapidly toward the ocean floor, using the submarine's mechanical systems to change depth faster than the organic alien creatures could follow. The aliens had evolved for stability in their deep ocean environment, but this adaptation made them slow to respond when conditions changed quickly. Lisa's submarine could handle the rapid pressure changes that would damage or disorient the alien vessels. The first successful counterattack proved that human creativity could overcome alien technology. Instead of fighting the creatures directly, Lisa's team used the underwater mountain itself as a weapon. They fired their railguns at specific points on the rocky slope, causing an underwater avalanche that buried several alien vessels under tons of stone and sediment. Engineer Mike Thompson watched the battle from the command center and immediately understood the implications of Lisa's victory. The aliens were not invincible masters of the deep ocean, but living beings with limitations that could be exploited. He began developing what he called the Leviathan Protocol, a new strategy that used multiple small submarines working together. Instead of relying on large vessels that the aliens could easily target, the protocol took advantage of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to work together in chaotic situations. While the aliens seemed to operate as individuals following programmed behaviors, humans could adapt their tactics in real time and coordinate complex group actions. Small teams of submarines could confuse alien sonar systems and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Former fisherman Tony Rivers was one of the first civilian volunteers to join the submarine program. His years of experience reading ocean currents and understanding fish behavior translated surprisingly well to underwater combat. He could predict where alien creatures would move based on the same instincts that had helped him find schools of fish, and his small converted fishing vessel became one of the most successful submarine hunters in the human fleet. Deep-sea welder Rachel Green brought different skills to the fight, having spent years working on underwater oil rigs and pipelines. She understood how to function in the hostile deep ocean environment where the smallest mistake could be fatal. Her submarine was equipped with modified welding equipment that could cut through alien biomechanical hulls or repair human vessels damaged in battle. The aliens' greatest strength became their weakness as humans learned to use the ocean environment against them. The invaders had built their cities in the deepest parts of the ocean, thinking themselves safe from surface dwellers, but they had also trapped themselves in predictable locations. Human submarines could use underwater canyons and thermal vents to approach alien positions without being detected. Susan developed electromagnetic pulse devices that could disrupt the aliens' bioelectrical systems without damaging human mechanical equipment. The weapons worked by creating powerful electromagnetic fields that interfered with the electrical signals the aliens used to control their living ships. While the aliens relied on complex biological systems, human submarines used simple mechanical controls that continued working even when their electronics failed. The turning point came when Lisa's team discovered that alien biomechanical technology depended on specific chemical conditions in the seawater. The creatures absorbed nutrients and energy from the ocean around them, but they could not survive in water that had been chemically altered. Human submarines began carrying tanks of different chemicals that could be released to create zones where alien vessels could not function. Mike's Leviathan protocol was tested in a major battle near the alien stronghold in the Atlantic Ocean. 12 small submarines attacked the enemy position from different directions, using the chaos of multiple targets to overwhelm the aliens' response systems. The creatures could handle threats that came from predictable directions, but they became confused when attacked by enemies that moved in patterns that defied their programmed responses. The human pilots learned to fight in complete darkness, using only sonar and their knowledge of underwater terrain to navigate during battles. This gave them an unexpected advantage because the aliens relied heavily on their bioluminescent communication systems, which made them visible to human sensors. Even when they thought they were hidden, each successful mission taught humanity more about their enemies' weaknesses and limitations. The aliens were perfectly adapted to their deep ocean environment, but this specialization made them vulnerable when forced to operate outside their preferred conditions. Human submarines could function across a much wider range of depths and water conditions, giving them flexibility that the aliens lacked. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven they could fight back against the invaders. The deep ocean was no longer an alien sanctuary where humans could not reach. Human submarines now patrolled the depths, hunting the creatures that had thought themselves safe in the crushing darkness. The aliens had chosen Earth's oceans as their conquest target, but they had not expected the surface dwellers to follow them into the abyss. Kevin and Susan continued developing new weapons and tactics, while Lisa and her growing fleet of submarine pilots carried the war deeper into alien territory. The ocean depths that had seemed impossible to reach were becoming humanity's newest battlefield, where the future of Earth would be decided in crushing darkness thousands of meters below the surface. Captain Lisa Barnes had become something that had never existed before. A hunter of the deep ocean who stalked alien prey in the crushing darkness where no human had ever fought. Her submarine moved through the black water like a predator, its hull modified with sensors and weapons that could function at depths where the pressure would instantly kill an unprotected human. She commanded Task Force Neptune, an elite unit of pilots who had learned to see through sonar and fight battles in 3 dimensions where up and down meant nothing. The transformation from hunted to hunter had taken months of brutal training and countless modifications to their submarines. Lisa's crew had learned to navigate using only the pings and echoes of their sonar systems, building mental maps of the underwater world around them. They could identify alien vessels by the unique sound signatures their biomechanical hulls made as they moved through the water, and they had memorized the acoustic patterns that meant danger or opportunity. Pilot Emma Hayes had discovered humanity's greatest advantage in the war against the aliens during a desperate battle near the Puerto Rico Trench. Her submarine had been surrounded by alien creatures that should have destroyed her easily, but she survived by doing something the aliens never expected. She improvised. Instead of following standard combat procedures, Emma used her submarine's mechanical arm to grab a piece of debris and throw it at one of the alien vessels, confusing its sensors long enough for her to escape. This random act of creativity revealed a fundamental difference between human and alien thinking. The invaders followed predictable patterns based on their biological programming, responding to threats in ways that had been perfected over millions of years of evolution. But humans could think of new solutions in real time, using their environment. In ways that defied logic or previous experience, Emma's team began using everything from modified fishing nets to controlled underwater explosions, turning the ocean environment into a weapon against the invaders. They would drop weighted nets to tangle alien creatures, or use small explosives to trigger underwater landslides that buried enemy positions. The aliens had superior technology, but they could not predict the chaotic creativity of human warfare. The ocean's natural features became tactical advantages as the human pilots learned to read the underwater landscape like soldiers reading a battlefield. Submarine engineer Paul Davis developed ghost protocols that allowed human vessels to disappear into the background noise of thermal vents and underwater currents. His modified submarines could hide in places where the rushing water and geological activity masked their mechanical sounds from alien sensors. Paul's breakthrough came when he realized that the ocean itself was full of natural camouflage that humans could use but aliens could not. The invaders' biomechanical technology was too sophisticated for its own good, automatically filtering out background noise and focusing on specific types of signals. Human submarines, with their crude mechanical systems, could blend into the environmental chaos that alien sensors ignored. The war escalated when alien forces attempted to create a massive tsunami that would destroy every coastal city on Earth. Their plan involved using synchronized pressure waves from multiple underwater positions to generate a wall of water that would travel across entire ocean basins. The attack would have killed hundreds of millions of people and destroyed human civilization's connection to the sea. Commander Sarah Johnson led the desperate mission to stop the alien tsunami project. Her intelligence indicated that the invaders had built a massive tidal manipulation device in the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, where the crushing pressure and distance from the surface would make human intervention impossible. The device used the aliens' mastery of biomechanical technology to amplify natural tidal forces into a weapon of planetary destruction. Sarah's assault team consisted of 12 submarines equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had developed. They carried nuclear charges designed to function at extreme depths, electromagnetic pulse generators that could disrupt alien bioelectrical systems, and experimental sonic weapons that used sound waves to damage the invaders' sensitive hearing organs. The journey to the target took them through the heart of alien territory, past underwater cities that glowed with bioluminescent activity and teemed with creatures that had never been seen by human eyes. The aliens had transformed the deep ocean into a thriving ecosystem that served their needs, with living vessels that grew like coral and biomechanical factories that processed minerals from the seafloor. Lisa's task, Force Neptune, provided escort for Sarah's mission, fighting running battles with alien defenders as the assault team descended toward their target. The combat was unlike anything in human military history, taking place in complete darkness at depths where the water pressure could crush steel. The pilots fought by sonar alone, firing weapons they could not see at enemies that appeared only as blips on their screens. The aliens' strongest defenses protected their tidal manipulation device, including massive creatures that seemed to be living fortresses armed with bioweapons that could dissolve human submarine hulls. These guardian beings had been specifically designed to prevent any interference with the tsunami project, and they attacked with the single-minded determination of creatures following their biological programming. Emma Hayes proved that human creativity could overcome even the most sophisticated alien defenses when she used her submarines. Emergency ballast system as a weapon. By rapidly releasing compressed air, she created a massive bubble that rose toward the surface and dragged one of the alien guardians with it. The creature's biomechanical systems could not handle the rapid pressure change, and it was destroyed by the very ocean environment it had been designed to dominate. The final assault on the tidal manipulation device required Sarah's team to navigate through a maze of alien biomechanical structures, while under constant attack from defenders that seemed to appear from every direction. The aliens had learned to anticipate human tactics and had prepared countermeasures for the weapons and strategies that had worked in previous battles, but the invaders could not prepare for the human capacity for sacrifice. When Sarah's submarine was crippled by alien weapons just short of the target, her crew manually detonated their nuclear charges while still inside their vessel. The explosion destroyed the tidal manipulation device and prevented the tsunami, but it also vaporized Sarah and her team in an instant of nuclear fire that briefly turned the deep ocean trench into a miniature sun. The loss of the tsunami weapon forced the aliens to change their strategy from planetary destruction to targeted attacks on human submarine bases and manufacturing facilities. They began hunting the modified vessels that had proven so effective against their forces, using new biomechanical creatures specifically designed to counter human tactics and weapons. Paul Davis responded by developing even more advanced ghost protocols that could hide entire fleets of submarines from alien detection. His new systems used the ocean's natural acoustic properties to create false echoes and phantom targets that confused alien sensors. Human submarines could now appear to be in multiple places at once, or seem to vanish completely when attacked by superior forces. The war in the depths had become a deadly game of hide and seek played out across the ocean floor, with human creativity pitted against alien evolution. Both sides adapted their tactics constantly, learning from each encounter and developing new ways to hunt their enemies. The aliens had superior individual vessels, but humans excelled at coordinated group tactics that used their environment as a weapon. Emma's pilots had become masters of improvised warfare, using everything from cargo containers to underwater construction equipment as weapons against alien forces. They turned the ocean's own features against the invaders, using underwater mountains, thermal vents, and current systems to gain tactical advantages that their enemies' biological programming could not anticipate. The deep ocean that had once seemed empty and lifeless now swarmed with activity as human and alien forces fought for control of Earth's largest environment. The war had transformed both species, pushing them to develop new technologies and tactics for survival in the crushing depths where the future of the planet would be decided. The final battle for Earth's oceans began in the deepest place on the planet, where the Challenger Deep stretched down into darkness that had never known sunlight. Captain Jake Harrison, who had been among the first humans to encounter the alien invaders, now commanded a fleet of advanced submarines that represented humanity's greatest technological achievement. His vessels moved through the crushing depths with confidence, their crews trained to fight in an environment where their ancestors could never have survived. The Abyssal Collective had built their central command structure in this ultimate depth, believing that no surface dweller could ever threaten them in a place where the water pressure exceeded 1,000 times what humans experienced at sea level. Their massive biomechanical complex stretched across the ocean floor like a living city, pulsing with bioluminescent networks that coordinated alien operations across all of Earth's oceans. Jake's assault force consisted of 60 submarines, each one a masterpiece of human engineering that combined the best technologies developed during years of underwater warfare. The vessels carried weapons that had been designed specifically to function in the extreme conditions of the deepest ocean, from electromagnetic pulse generators to sonic disruptors that could shatter alien biomechanical hulls. The alien defenders that rose to meet them were unlike anything humans had encountered before. These creatures had been grown specifically to protect the collective's most important facility, and they combined the worst aspects of every alien vessel that human forces had fought. They moved with the speed of the smaller scout creatures but carried the devastating weapons of the massive jellyfish ships, and their numbers seemed endless. Emma Hayes led the first wave of attack submarines into the alien defenses, using the chaotic combat tactics that had made her famous throughout the human fleet. Her pilots fought with the improvised creativity that had become humanity's signature in the war against the invaders, turning pieces of debris into weapons and using the ocean environment itself to confuse and destroy their enemies. The battle spanned multiple depth levels as human submarines used their ability to change altitude rapidly to outmaneuver alien defenders that were adapted for specific pressure conditions. Jake coordinated the assault from his command vessel, directing his forces like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction through the three-dimensional battlefield of the deep ocean. The aliens' greatest strength had always been their perfect adaptation to the deep-sea environment, but this specialization became their fatal weakness when faced with human determination and creativity. The collective had evolved or been designed for individual perfection, with each creature fulfilling its biological role with flawless efficiency, but they could not match the chaotic teamwork that allowed humans to adapt to impossible situations. Human submarine crews worked together in ways that defied the aliens' programmed responses, sharing resources and coordinating attacks that no individual vessel could accomplish alone. When Emma's submarine lost its main weapons, her crew continued fighting by using their mechanical arms to grab alien creatures and throw them into other attackers. When Jake's command vessel was damaged, dozens of other submarines moved to protect it without being ordered. The breakthrough came when human forces discovered the central weakness of the alien command structure. The collective's biomechanical technology depended on constant communication between all parts of their network, with each alien vessel receiving instructions from the central hub in the deepest trench. But humans had learned to disrupt these communications using electromagnetic weapons that interfered with the biological signals the aliens used to coordinate their actions. Paul Davis had developed the final weapon that would decide the war, a massive electromagnetic pulse generator that could shut down every alien system within hundreds of miles. The device required enormous amounts of power and had to be placed directly against the collective's central hub, making it essentially a suicide mission for whoever delivered it. Jake volunteered to carry the weapon into the heart of the alien stronghold, knowing that his submarine would be destroyed in the electromagnetic explosion that would cripple the invaders' command system. His crew refused to abandon him, and together they piloted their vessel through the heaviest alien defenses toward the glowing biomechanical structure that controlled the enemy fleet. The final assault was a desperate race against time as alien forces threw everything they had at the human attackers. Massive creatures that had been held in reserve emerged from hidden caverns in the ocean floor, biomechanical weapons that seemed more like living fortresses than individual vessels. The aliens understood that their survival depended on stopping the human attack, and they fought with the desperate fury of beings facing extinction. Emma's pilots provided cover for Jake's suicide run, sacrificing their own submarines to clear a path through the alien defenses. Human creativity reached its peak as the pilots used every trick they had learned during years of underwater warfare, from creating false targets with debris to using controlled explosions to confuse alien sensors. The electromagnetic pulse that destroyed the collective's central hub lit up the deepest ocean like a second sun, its energy racing through the biomechanical networks that connected every alien vessel and structure. The invaders' perfect coordination collapsed in an instant as their communication system failed, leaving individual creatures confused and directionless without the central intelligence that had guided their actions. Without their command structure, the alien forces fell apart like a machine with its brain removed. Individual creatures continued to fight, but they could no longer coordinate their attacks or adapt to changing conditions. Human submarines that had been outnumbered and outgunned suddenly found themselves facing confused enemies that attacked randomly without strategy or support. The collapse of the alien network triggered a chain reaction that spread across all of Earth's oceans. Alien cities that had seemed impregnable began shutting down as their biomechanical systems failed without central coordination. The massive creatures that had terrorized human shipping lost their purpose and began returning to the deepest trenches where they slowly died without the artificial support that had kept them alive. Dr. Lisa Morgan, who had been among the first humans to encounter the aliens, now surveyed the abandoned structures that littered the ocean floor like the ruins of a lost civilization. The alien biomechanical technology had not been destroyed but left to decay, and already Earth's natural sea life was beginning to colonize the empty structures. Fish swam through abandoned alien corridors, and coral began growing on biomechanical hulls that no longer pulsed with artificial life. The victory had cost humanity dearly, with thousands of submarine crews lost in the depths and entire coastal cities damaged by alien attacks. But the species had proven something important about themselves. They would never surrender their homeworld to any invader, regardless of how advanced or alien their technology might be. Captain Lisa Barnes, now promoted to admiral, oversaw the establishment of humanity's first permanent underwater cities built from repurposed alien technology. The biomechanical structures that had once housed the invaders were converted into human habitats, allowing people to live and work in the deep ocean environment that had previously been impossible to colonize. The war had transformed humanity in ways that would have seemed impossible before the invasion. Children who had never seen the surface learned to navigate through three-dimensional underwater environments, and engineers developed new technologies that combined human creativity with alien biomechanical principles. The deep ocean was no longer a hostile frontier, but humanity's newest home. The aliens had underestimated the one thing that made humans unique among Earth species: their refusal to accept limitations or surrender to superior force. When faced with invaders who controlled the largest part of their planet, humans had followed them into the crushing depths and learned to fight in an environment where they had no natural advantages. The oceans that had once seemed like an alien domain now belonged to humanity, patrolled by submarines that could reach any depth and defended by crews who had learned to think in 3 dimensions. Earth's waters would never again be vulnerable to invasion from beings who thought the surface dwellers were too primitive to challenge their mastery of the deep.